We've asked Linda Hoffman, my brother's wife, the women's director here, ministry director here at our church. Linda, why don't you come up? Let's give her a hand. To say I love Linda and appreciate her is an understatement. And she's got a special thing going. And why don't I give the mic right over to you? And you have a mic. Oh, okay.
But you can set that down right here because one of our ladies is going to need it. Happy Mother's Day, the night before. We want to start out our time together with a video. We interviewed some of the kids from our church here and asked them some questions about their moms and their view of life. And why don't we go straight to that video right now, see what they had to say.
Starbucks. Yeah, she likes Starbucks. Normally when you make her laugh, it's kind of fun. When the twins aren't crying. When the baby's asleep.
Why does that make her happy?
Because she doesn't have to nurse her. When the twins are crying. When the baby's awake. Yelling. Yelling. And screaming. Punching. Kicking. No, ask me about that. Yes. She actually makes kind of good oatmeal. Well, I want to do that. Yes. Sometimes. Well, I want to do what I forget what Daddy does. He plays secret on. They put blankets over us. Make pizza. Well, she makes pizzas way too much. Well, there's already like made pizzas and she just warms them up. Yeah. So it's not that. And we kind of got sick of it after a while. I think she just lays down and sleep. Sometimes she just takes a shower. That's all. But sometimes she just gets out. Probably cleans and washes dishes. Well, she's good at planting plants, and I think that's all. Oh, she's really good at rolling dough out. That's gonna be a hard one. None of us know that one, so yes. 8 feet. 4 feet? 5 feet? She's as tall as she was when she was 13 now. So. Juggling. My apple. Yeah, she's not really good at piano. Because she takes care of us. Did you just make her like that? Takes care of me when I'm sick. Yeah. Yeah. Shut her door to her bedroom. Have self-control. I love you.
Okay, those are our kids' view. They're interpreting life. We are their models. And I want to show you a few more pictures. They're always kind of sending pictures back to us to show us what they're thinking. So I want to show you a few more. This first one right here is one of my favorites. These are all from kids in our congregation. They are showing mom and dad kissing, a picture of love and safety. The next one, proof that we came out of the ocean and did evolve. The next one, they're showing the companionship between their mom and their dad. And if you get a little bit more of a close-up, you're going to see that that's where they show that the matrix is real, and that is where dad plugs in. So they are interpreting life through us. It's Mother's Day, and moms always want a close family. And we taught in our family, no matter what, birthdays, holidays, Mother's Day, that we love and honor one another. And Mark was attempting to teach one of our sons to honor me on my birthday. And so men tend to have less words than women. And so he got together with my son, and he was about 4, and they came up, 3 or 4, and they came up with a card for my birthday. So I want to put it up there right there. It says, Happy birthday, Mom. They put this together on the computer, which is a big deal for Mark. So then he asked him, what would you like to say? If we can have the inside. He says, Dear Mom, I love you, and could I have a cat? Happy birthday. Now, when I opened it up, I said, that's it, Mark? He said, you know, he didn't want to say anything else. He was spent. That's all that was in him, honey. So we women are always asking men for more words. So a few years later, Will had written me a poem for Mother's Day, and my 14-year-old son had given me a gift. He didn't have a lot of money, and he said he would unload the dishwasher every day for a week, which I thought was awesome. That was really good. I'd prefer that. So a couple days after that, I was sitting at the table, and I was rereading the poem that Will had written, and my son was unloading the dishwasher, and I said to my son, you know, it's kind of sad for you, but if you'd just written me a poem, you wouldn't have to be doing a chore. So he jumps up, runs out of the room, goes and grabs his guitar, and he comes back into the kitchen and proceeds to strum it. And if you could put up the next slide, this is what he said. I love you when you yell at me. I love you when you scream. I love you when you give me chores and things I need to clean. I love you when you leap the stairs all flustered in a fit, and I love you when you say, darn it, Bryce, you really need to quit. And he went on to the chorus, I love you, Mom, more than words could ever say when put into a song. I love you, Mom, even though I'm always right, and you are always wrong, wrong, wrong. He stopped at that point, told me, Mom, if I had a studio and I could go mix this, I could bring in drums and really crescendo it right here. It could be good. So I learned something that day, that asking for more words from men doesn't always work out to your advantage. I don't know why I didn't just let him quietly, without words, continue to unload the dishwasher. But moms are always doing things to make kids feel a sense of belonging, and we're always trying to make home. And God has some things to say about family, and he wants to help and guide us as his children while we're teaching our children. And as a society, you all know that we are ignoring a lot of what God's saying, and we're doing things our own way. We're redefining family and gender and all these things, and we're redesigning according to our insights. And I was just thinking about that because we have the right to do that, and I was wondering, how well is that going to work out? So I want to show you just a couple of pictures of people who are redesigning according to their will. Can I have that first one? This is obviously a man. It's a new style barbecue. And you can see it's just a chair on top of this. If we can go to the next one. This again is a man. And I'm sure that this barbecue is much more convenient. And I am sure that there's no wife involved in that endeavor right there. Go ahead on to the next. This recipe called for a beater. You'll notice a drill with a scissor stuck into it. It worked. I don't know how well. And finally, we have a bathroom remodel right here. If you look really close. Ease and convenience. So, when we redefine things and set our own standards, especially for masculinity, femininity, family, all these things, we are like children, lacking understanding. Jesus said something. Can I have the next slide? He said, he was talking to the Sadducees. They came to trick him, and they had a question about heaven. And Jesus told them that they were mistaken. And he said, is this not the reason that you're mistaken? That you do not understand the scriptures or the power of God. And then he went on to talk all about heaven, and then he said at the end, in this you are greatly mistaken. So we have very little experience, 60, 70, 80 years that we have on the earth versus thousands of years of human history. We want to be really careful that when we're talking about family and child rearing and all these things, that we don't become greatly mistaken. So God tells us that there were two trees in the garden that we got to choose from. One was knowledge and one was life. The tree of knowledge says, I will define myself, versus the tree of life in which the Lord said, why don't you just rest in me and let me show you the way? But because we defined wrongly after our own wisdoms, things did not always work out so well. we kind of try to push and press ourselves into a design that God didn't give us. So before I ask our panel to come up here to give you tips on motherhood, I want to just spend a minute remembering again God's grand and glorious purpose for the family. Because if you don't know what you're trying to get to, you're not going to know how to get there. So since God is the author and the architect of all creation, he designed the family as the crowning act of creation. He did everything first, then he did this. And he said it was an earthly expression of his heavenly kingdom, that it would always work upon the earth, and wherever we went, we would be able to go back to the family to see something about God, that it was the basic social unit created by God to extend his covenant kingdom, his covenant promises, and his kingdom on earth. Can I have the scripture? He said this about family. He said, have you not read, again, understand the scriptures, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and for this reason the man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Then he went on to say, this mystery is great. A mystery encompasses the power of God. But he said, I'm speaking with reference to Christ and the church. So the family had a purpose. He said he would bless this family with his covenant. They would be fruitful, they would multiply, they would fill the earth and bring the earth under God's order. So he placed in this little family unit both the order and the government through which he wanted them to manage all of his creation. And he chose to reveal something about himself in the union of this man and woman. Can I have the next slide? His own character, his works, his purpose on earth. In the midst of the marriage, God discloses his very nature and attitude for all the people of the earth to observe. He symbolizes this covenant relationship between Christ and the church and the family. Christ's headship, his love, his lifestyle of laying down his life for others, all of this God built into this committed relationship that binds a man and a woman together. And it's been said that a husband needs to ask, am I willing to die for her? And that a wife needs to ask, am I willing to live for him? And it's this attitude of submission to one another and to Christ that helps a marriage not only survive, but serve as a light to others in the world. So you have this incredible purpose on earth, this incredibly beautiful foundation in which to bring new life. Children come into this. If you're in a situation that it's not ideal, then Jesus said, don't forget to know the scriptures and understand the power of God. Whatever your situation is, God says his power can come in to bring new life, to a shaking marriage, to the absence of a parent in a family. But whatever you do, don't go so far off track that you become greatly mistaken in what he wants. We have Oaks. In fact, we're going to see a video by the Oaks guys right now where guys go to learn more about how God created them to be men. And we do Women by Design for women who want to go more in depth to understand, why did he make me the way I am? But you want what God designed. We have the battle of the sexes because we each think our way is best, but each way is seen from very different strength standpoints. Kids need male and female influence. And if we work within our strengths, then we're going to have the best team possible and the strongest society. Because everyone can't do everything as good as each other. You weren't designed to. In a Sunday school class teaching on how God created everything, including humans, this little boy was listening intently to how Eve was created out of Adam's rib. And he knew that this was important. So a few days later, when he was at home lying in bed feeling sick, his mom said, what's wrong, honey? And he said, I have a pain in my side. I think I'm going to have a wife. They're learning, they're digesting, they're trying to understand life through us. And men value God's design. So we're going to look at a video. We went to our Oaks class, and we asked them a few questions about women and what they thought. So let's see that video.
The thing that astounds me about her is her ability to do so many things so incredibly well.
I appreciate how much they have taught me.
Especially having two boys, is having a woman around the house is so nice. She's just just that peaceful creature that can just bring, again, just that calming influence of a rough and tough house where you're getting checked going down the hallways. She just has that way of bringing the girly stuff to a house full of guys.
I mean, appearance obviously is one thing, but I mean, just their personality, how they act, how they interact with other people, just how caring they are. At least my daughter and my wife, especially my mom, they're just very, very caring. Managing. I think they're a lot better at managing multiple things, tasks at once, versus where I don't believe men are that good.
Definitely the nurturing. You know, it's just unbelievable to see a child's face change when they, you know, see a woman approaching or a mother approaching.
They bring a definite balance. They bring the other half of us together, definitely.
My wife just keeps everything running smooth. She is the one that, when the house is chaotic, she makes it calm and soothing and makes a great place for her and her boys.
Exactly what my wife is, Sarah Marie Robbins. That's what it would be.
Gosh, knowing the Lord has got to be the key.
She definitely would have to put Christ above everything. I mean, it would be the wife that I have right now.
Just the sweet spirit that a woman has, that just by the way they talk, the way they act, the way they look, there's just something so sweet about a woman. You don't see that with a guy.
Probably being like really aggressive or trying to overpower just every situation.
Somebody that is overbearing.
Just a harshness, kind of a toughness. Sometimes when a woman, it almost like she's trying to take the role of a guy, either I don't need a guy, or that kind of rough and tough kind of a way.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's nothing wrong with being a man and being a woman. You know, that's how God intended it to be, and I hope it stays that way forever.
The Bible's real clear. It's man and it's woman, period.
We try to maybe outthink God or try to create it in our own way, but God had a plan, and He had man to be a man and a woman to be a woman, and when we mess with that, we seem to screw it up. And there's just something special about what a woman brings to a man, and that we can't duplicate that. The world may try to force something together that doesn't work, but it's just not the same as how God designed it to be.
Let's give those guys a hand. They were really nervous. They were really nervous, but they volunteered. They had things in their heart that they wanted to say. So this is Mother's Day, and we're going to honor the strengths of mothers today. And so I've asked a couple of women to come up here and talk. They're not representative of every aspect of family situation out there. What they basically are is simply women who gained the respect of their peers by the things that they've done and the choices that they've made in their parenting. So this is Anita Esslinger. She has a degree in nutrition. She's a mom of 5, 4 boys, 1 girl, all in 5 years, right? And she is Dan Esslinger's wife, and she leads mommies and the parenting class with her husband. This is Allison, I almost said Schutz, Bennett. Allison Bennett. She is Gina's right-hand person at our grade school. She was administrative aide in our office for years, organizing and managing everything. She has 2 teen girls, and she is the wife of Jim. So let's put up the next slide. What we want to concentrate on, the art of mothering, is the art of teaching. The art of mothering is to teach the art of living to your children. So we're going to ask them a little bit about their families. And I want to also point out their families of origin were not families that taught them any of the principles, any of the biblical principles. So Nitsa, tell us just a little bit about where you came from.
Okay. I am full Greek, and I was raised in the Greek Orthodox Church, and I was the middle of 5 children, and my parents divorced when I was 11, and that kind of led me into a life of living in the world. And when I was 17, I moved out to San Diego, and I started working at a local grocery store, and I met my husband's mom, and we became really good friends. And eventually I met my husband, probably like 3 years later. And when I met him, I thought he was really good looking. I met him at a picnic, and I wanted to get together with him, but I was living in the world. I had just ended a relationship of 3 years where I lived with a guy, and so I was not at all up to my husband's standard. And so when we met, I was like following him around the picnic, trying to get his attention, and he was moving away from me at the picnic, trying to move away from me. And so I ended up going farther, and a few days later called him from my house, got his number from my work, and I invited him to a party I was having at my house. I lived by myself, and he, on the phone, said he does not drink, that he has a commitment with God. And I was a little bit taken back, and I thought it was weird, and I just told him, well, you don't have to drink. Well, he did end up coming, and by the end of that night, I was pushing my drink away, because when he walked in, he represented instantly something very different to me. And so he ended up inviting me to church. I came and gave my life to the Lord, and about 5 years later, we got married. We've been married for 14 years. After we had gotten married, I couldn't have kids. It took me about 3.5 years to get pregnant, which is why we have 5, because we didn't stop.
So she went from nothing and tears to 5 in 5 years. Oh, that rhymes. That's really good. I should call Bryce. And Allison, you also didn't come from a background in which you had a Christian foundation.
Yes, I was the youngest. It was just me and my sister, and my parents were married until I was about 11 and a half years old, and then they got divorced. Although it wasn't a biblically based home, my mom grew up in a Jewish family, and my father grew up in a Catholic home, but neither of them were active in either of those faiths. So we were left to kind of choose on our own what we believed. We celebrated Christmas and Hanukkah, which as a kid in school is awesome, because you get twice as many gifts, and you get out of class when you're doing Christmas stuff, because you celebrate Hanukkah. So I worked that to my advantage. But my home was very ordered and very disciplined, and had very high standards of morality. And early on in my mothering, it became clear to me that I did not have the foundation I needed, or what I thought I needed, to raise children on a biblical basis. But the Lord met with me in my living room and shared with me how he was going to redeem what I hadn't gotten as a daughter while I parented mine.
And the Lord is amazing in those things. And when you start out with no foundation, you really kind of get to be the hero for the next generation. You get to be the first one that breaks the chains that the family has brought in, and begin a whole new thing. But it's not easy. It's also not easy for a woman and a man come together, because we have different perspectives. So, Nitsa, let's go to point number 1. If you could just put that up. One of the tips that you guys told me was, a husband sees from a different perspective than me. Why is that a tip, and why is that good?
Well, my husband and I are very different. We're polar opposites. So our whole marriage, on top of me becoming a Christian, which we don't recommend, by the way, to become a Christian the way I did, it's very difficult, and there's a reason the Bible says to be equally yoked. But being different, man and woman, but learning to communicate together was hard for us. And so we pressed through with the Lord's help and got together and made some standards for our marriage prior to kids. And then when kids comes, it intensifies, so it's important you do it prior to. So kissing when you come in the house. That's an important thing. So you reconnect at that moment when you haven't seen each other all day. Going on dates. We have a weekly date, which we do talk about our kids most of the time, but it's a good thing because we reconnect, we regroup about the next week, and it starts off the week in a good way. So those are things that we do.
And how about you, Allison, bringing unity to your marriage?
Unity to marriage. Are you talking about?
Or a man's perspective. Yeah. A man sees from a different perspective, and you have to come to a place of unity.
Yes, yes. My husband and I definitely see from different perspectives. I think I thought in the beginning mine was right, and he should see it my way. But it wasn't long into our marriage that I realized he had a wealth of wisdom that I didn't have, because he saw from a different perspective. He came from a different history and background that I did. Whether it was the good or the bad that each of us brought, we brought something different, and all of it was going to be valuable to how we raised our kids. So because I tend to be more open and talkative, I early on had to learn how to ask him to share his perspective and be open to include him and get that insight from him. I just think it's really important that in seeing his different perspective, that he felt respected, that it was important that his opinion was heard. And I think the more I've done that through the years, the more he's shared even more of what he sees.
Okay. Point number 2, you don't raise your kids alone. And that doesn't mean necessarily with in a husband or wife, but we have a whole fathers are needed, families get broken, extended families are needed too. Mom is not going to be the only voice in the kid's life. So, Nitsa, your family, part of your family is in LA. You don't have grandma and grandpa here helping you out. So, when you don't raise your kids alone, what do? How do you get help? How do you set a standard for them?
Well, I don't have a lot of family, like Linda said, that's around or near. They're busy and they have things going on. And about a year ago, I would honestly say I got to a place where I was rather frustrated that I was feeling alone. And I have 5 kids, and you can't just call on anybody to watch 5 kids that are so little.
Do we have any volunteers out there? People are just anxious to watch.
Please. And we have standards, so I'll throw that out there too. But the Lord, when I was crying out to the Lord, in frustration, I felt like I heard God say, I didn't feel like it, I heard God say that He gave me family. I just didn't want to ask. And that family was the family of God. And I felt like there was plenty of people that I could have asked, but my expectation was looking at what I thought it should have looked like and what I wished it was. And God was saying, break out of that and go ask. So what my husband and I did is we kind of came together and made this game plan of who are the families we love that have kids our kids' age. These 3 families we're pursuing. And what married couples have raised their kids well, because we're going to pursue them too. And so that was kind of the approach we took, and God has overjoyed and blessed us with what He's given us.
And I remember in our own lives in raising children that 3 or 4 of us families got together, especially when they reached junior high age, and we decided to all have the same standards. So they couldn't come back and say, well, that's not the way they do it. We'd say, oh, yes, it is. So it was very helpful. So Allison, how about you guys? What do you do?
Well, I think similar to Danny and Nitsa, Jim and I early on watched families within the church and saw what we liked, the fruit in their children and from their parenting, and would invite ourselves to their house for dinner and ask them lots of questions. But we would seek out relationship with people that we valued what we saw them doing. I also think really early on in preschool, I can remember the Lord speaking to me when my oldest was in preschool that their teachers were going to matter to me a lot, that their teachers, just like my husband, were going to have a different perspective and insight about my children. And so from a young age, people like their teachers, even their doctor, just a lot of different people that God would point out to me would interact with my children over the years, and it would be valuable to me to allow them to help me parent my child and to learn from them as well.
And I think also asking the people that you know that you respect what they think about your parenting, to be humble and say, if you're having problems and things, to just say, tell me what you think. But then you also have to be the kind of person that they will risk that. Some people won't tell you because they know it will destroy the relationship. They can't be critical, they'll destroy it. I wanted to sit down with people and say, tell me what you think. Tell me, I promise we'll be friends, I need to know. Because they come from an outside perspective and they can show you things that you can work on and grow in. In the midst of all of this, there's a million things going on that can keep a family busy all the time. The next point you guys said was, always choose family first. So Nitsa, how do you do that?
Well, my husband and I both loved ministry early on from us dating, and so it was fine until we had kids, and then I realized quickly I didn't want to be a wife home alone while he's doing all this ministry, because I still had a deep desire, and he was on the same page. So we, again, just came together and came up with ways that we could do a little bit of both, keeping our marriage first and our family, and that's we do our meals at the table. That's just a standard we have for our home. We're always around breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and if my husband's not home, then I sit with my kids around the table, and we still communicate and talk and have good conversation at the table. So meals at the table is big for our family. And
how often do you say, sit down and keep your hands to yourself?
Well, a lot. A lot. Yeah, come to the parenting class. We'll teach you how to make it happen. But it's possible. And then also we said that we would be home together as a family more nights than we would be apart. So our rule of thumb is 4 nights home, 3 nights out. We don't live by it, but that's just our rule of thumb if there's a lot going on that week. And then we came up with some routine connection times throughout the week. And that is, we do donuts on Sunday. My husband is the high school pastor, so church is something we're at a lot, and so we wanted to make church different than ministry, so we do donuts. And before church, as a family, no one else invited, we connect there every Sunday. Thursday nights, we do game night, just a couple games with some gummy bears as prizes. They love it. And we do dates with our kids. I'm not hard and fast about every kid has to have a date. Someone told me once that not every kid needs a date, so make sure you're dating the ones that need it. And so we kind of do dates or secret dates, and that's where if we really are feeling burdened about one particular kid, my oldest is 7 now, but one particular kid, we actually will wake them up at 9 at night after they've gone to bed at 8, and we'll do a secret date. Don't tell them, because they all think they're the only ones that get secret dates. So don't tell them. But we do secret dates, and sometimes we go to Starbucks, and one of us, we don't leave the other kids at home. One of us will take the kid to Starbucks and have coffee and play games, but it's just to invest in them and let them know they're valuable to us separately and apart from the other 4. So those are just some tips that we...
How about you guys, Allison?
I think many of the same things Nitsa said are important and valuable to us in our home, spending time with our kids and putting time first as far as, eating together and a lot of those things. But I think something, especially as the girls got a little bit older, we started talking about it when they're younger, but our kids always have a voice in our home. They don't always get to make the decision. Oftentimes the decision's even made before we come to them to hear what their voice is about it. But we always try to make sure they understand whatever ministry we're involved in or classes we're taking or outside things we're doing from the family. They're a part of it somehow. When the girls were really little, if I took on somebody that I would maybe work with to mentor, I would explain to the girls that them behaving with daddy while he was at home watching them made it easier for mommy to be away. And so different things like that as they grew up to help them see how they were a part of what we were doing as a family.
And our next point, a parent-child relationship is not primarily a friendship. What do you have to say about that? Yes.
Well, I grew up in a home where that was really clear. You were not your parents' friends, almost to a fault, because my parents weren't real playful with us as kids. And so I knew that it was important that Jim and I were put in authority over our children, so I knew it was important that they understood we were their parents, but I wanted them to also understand they could have fun and play and be goofy with us. So we do that with our girls to a point. They can be silly and say certain things to us to a point. And we try to be very consistent with our boundaries. They can't talk to us the same way they talk to their friends because we're not their friends. We're their parents. I think that, I guess for Jim and I, we just take it pretty serious that we're in authority over them and that we need to answer to God. And so when they don't really like how we're doing that, we pretty much send them to him and tell them to take it up with him because that's who we're answering to.
Okay, and Nitsa, next point, never be afraid to say you're sorry and admit your faults. Now, our family didn't have any faults and we never had to say you're sorry, but apparently yours did. And so why don't you share some of the things that you did?
Well, when I first had kids, I had been waiting for 3.5 years, so I was very ready to be a mom, and I was, with my first 2 kids, the Pinterest perfect mom, and I thought I had it all together, and my kids obeyed just right, and I really didn't understand that kids are made differently until my 3rd kid, and he is blessed with a strong will, and I think God needed to show me this. The first time I ever had to walk out of Target because he was screaming and kicking, I was gonna die. And really, my critical heart was before me. Of every time I'd ever looked at someone and judged them for their child being a certain way. And so with God's grace, I was able to overcome that, and I had to repent of my critical thinking. That was really important. And 2, I had to learn to apologize because that particular child is strong-willed, and there was a time where I have shouted. I have, one particular time I was so upset because he was the kid that won't go to bed and has to get a drink and needs to go to the bathroom and do all this, and I had a lot to do, and it was nap time, and that's precious time to a mom. But anyways, I ended up, pulling him out of bed, and I was, as soon as he went to the bathroom, I felt deeply convicted, and I went to him and I said, hey, Mom has to apologize to you for doing that, and he wouldn't accept my apology. He wouldn't. And I was really blown away, and so the Lord brought the scripture to my mind that says, be kind, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, and we had just been memorizing it. And so I said, Judah, Mom is so sorry. And I said, do you remember that scripture we were learning? And he instantly remembered it. And I said, if you can forgive me like that, Jesus would be, proud of you, and I would be proud of you. And he said he'd forgive me, and his countenance instantly changed. And it honestly, my countenance changed far more than his. That day, I felt like I learned to apologize. Where apologies weren't easy in my home, I honestly felt like the Lord gave it back to me. And on that day, he showed me what a gift as a parent to teach your child that it's okay not to be perfect. And it's okay to make mistakes and ask for an apology and receive that forgiveness.
And Allison, you had a particular thing that happened.
I had a story when my oldest was, I don't have the greatest memory, but I think it was about 1st or 2nd grade. I think I was just awful to her on the way to school. I'm sure I thought everything I was saying was, right, and she needed to listen to me. And she's a very tender girl, so she was quiet and listened, and yes, Mommy, and okay, Mommy, and kind of shoved her out the door by the time we got to school, and she went about her day, and it all seemed normal until I turned the corner and went down the street to leave, and the Holy Spirit entered the car and told me to turn the car around. You need to pull your child out of class and tell her that you value her enough to tell her you're sorry, that you were wrong, that your behavior was ugly, that she doesn't deserve to be treated that way. And I think from that moment on, just as Nisa was saying, I realized how important it would be for my kids to see me humble myself and tell them when I was wrong and that I was sorry.
And I would start it always, the conversation with, remember the wrong, wrong, wrong song? And we would all sing it together. So it really helps our kids to understand they can be wrong then. This idea sometimes I think that parenting, if you tell them you're wrong, that they'll somehow lose respect. I think they really gain respect. So then, Allison, I want you to share that in this training process, because that's what we're doing. God trains us, we train them, we're his representatives on the earth. You said that in the training process, there are no rights to privacy. Explain that.
It doesn't probably make me popular with everyone, but I believe that in our home, my husband and I both believe that in our home, our children don't really have a lot of rights to be in their room, plugged in, turned off, tuned out from everything that's going on in our home. Our girls can shut their bedroom door, but we can open it whenever we like. It can't be locked. They can't have boys in their room. We just have certain standards about privacy. Honestly, if I felt it was necessary because of behavior I had seen change or was a little bit suspect, I'll read their journal. I will do whatever it is I need to do as a mom to feel that I'm protecting my kids and staying informed. And they know that, and I actually asked them if I could share about their reading their journals. They're like, yes, we know you do that.
It's not a snooping. It's
No.
Are they okay? Once you find out after a while that they're okay, then you don't need to continue this process. They're growing well.
And I think the other point that's really important, especially the age of my children and up, is our kids live in a world where they're taught to hide things, where they're encouraged to be deceptive and deceitful to their parents. It's there's lists of apps that you can find out about as a parent that your child can put on their device to hide things from you so that you're unable to see those things. And I mean, just the picture of that small piece of what goes on out in the world makes me feel more confident that I shouldn't be giving them privacy.
We're to guide, guard, and protect. So there has to be an openness by which we say, you've gone into a dark place, let me help you get out. Nitsa, privacy in your family.
Well, my kids are so little that there's no privacy. We're actually working the other way where we're like, shut the bathroom door. It's like, things like that. Like if mommy's in the bathroom or the shower, no peeking or talking under the door. So we're a little bit different. Right now we're in the family trust and vulnerability, and so nakedness is just a party in my house. So
You can't go outside naked. Would
no,
probably
you can't
be
go outside naked. That's
Okay.
a rule, or in your underwear. That doesn't count either.
Point number 7 is dare to be different in your standards than other families. Nitsa?
I love this. I think the number one thing as a mom of young children is to be intentional. We're just figuring it out. Some of you are in the same place I am. And the first thing that my husband and I do is we have to know God's standard, because that's what we base everything on. We don't make up our own rules for how we parent. We go off of what God's standard is. After that, when things are a little bit like gray in some areas, then we get counsel, we pray, we come together and give our own opinions, and then we make the best decision possible. And I think it's important that you're willing to be corrected. Like Linda said, this is huge in areas that you are making standards for. It's okay to have someone tell you, that standard seems like it needs to be raised a little, or maybe you're too hard, and that one needs to be corrected, and that's okay. And I want help because I want to do the very best job. And I feel like, moms, sometimes we wonder if we're doing okay by having these high standards. I think that, God made us for this job. He made us for it. He's going to equip us for it. And so, know God's word. Mother intuition can be a real thing, and make your best decision. And don't be afraid, because if you love God, He loves your children more than you. He's going to help you succeed.
And daring to be different in your standards often means that you're going to have higher expectations than some of the people around you. How do you guys do that, Allison? And how do you make that, how do you get your kids to buy into that?
Well, as I said earlier, I kind of grew up in a home that just had certain expectations, and if you didn't meet them, there were consequences. And maybe as harsh as that sounds, I think it's similar to God. He doesn't really ask certain things. He requires certain things, and there's consequences when you don't obey Him. And so in our home, it all comes back to that for our high standards. But I think I decided early on I would rather risk my kids thinking I expected too much of them than not enough, because I wanted my kids to believe what the Bible says, that they could do all things through Christ. And so knowing that my expectation was linked to God made it a little bit easier, feeling like I wasn't going to give them this heavy burden to bear, that they could do all these things and perform on their own, that it was all through God. But I think often in this world we expect far too little from children. And so I wanted my kids to know that they could be expected to behave in a restaurant when they were little. They could be expected to wait and not interrupt when people were, adults were talking. And, even now that they can act like godly young women, not maniac teenage girls.
You also made just a point that I loved, that their opinion matters, that they can hear from God, and you ask them, what is God telling you?
Yeah, at young ages for both of my kids, they would tell me things I didn't hear, or see things that I didn't see. And so I recognized early on that God spoke to my kids even when they were really little, and that I needed to pay attention because perhaps he was going to speak to me through them as well. And so did that answer what you said?
That God can speak to your children. And they have so much more to say, but because of our time right here, I want to make the final point that the outcome of this kind of parenting is that confidence comes because of competence. That these kids are growing in strength, they're growing in skills, they're growing in confidence, not just because someone says, I like you a whole lot, feel good about yourself. It's coming because of competence. And the goal is that our kids are confident and secure in who they are, recognizing their inherent value and their worth, and ready for the responsibilities of life. And most of us, women out there, feel that as we train, we really recognize our inadequacies. And we realize that we're not enough for the job. It's too big, it's too weighty. The consequences for failure are so big, and yet God commissioned us, his sheep, to do this job. And sometimes we fail to understand how much our kids need us and how much they really love us. So we want to close right now with a video about our kids knowing us.
Twisting vines of time, you're in their grasp. A staircase to climb, breathing in gasps. The wind only knows what happened to me. I know you're a rose trapped beneath the sea. This I know, I'll never let you down. This I know, I'll never let you down. Bruises on all the trees, echoing sound. If you're down on your knees for the final count, this I know, I'll never let you down.
Can we have the band back up here? God made you unique. He gave you, your children, a gift from him. He wants to mold you, and through you, he wants to mold them.